everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here, Proven Health Alternatives. I've got superstar in gut health and without question, a functional medicine expert, Maggie Awad. Maggie, how are you?
I am very grateful to be on here and just really just share a lot of valuable things that I've learned, with myself, and also a story behind that around with my mom and how I got into this. So doing great. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited because I know in the next 45 minutes or so, you're going to lay some knowledge bombs for everybody. And I am a gut guy because, as it's been said, all disease begins in the leaky gut.
Mhm.
80% of your immune cells are in the gut. It's where your macro and micronutrients are absorbed. 90% of the scientific literature describing the microbiome has been published in the last 5 years. I know you're up on all that data. We're outnumbered
Absolutely.
by bacteria cells, at a 10-to-1 ratio. Remember, everybody,
Yeah.
10-to-1, amazing. And DNA is 99% bacteria. And one little factoid before I turn it over to you, 72% of US adults say they have experienced GI symptoms a few times a month or more. You deal with mostly athletes. Why do these athletes have such an issue with their gut?
So to backtrack just a little bit, it's a personal story for me, and it all really started with my mom, right? I did not grow up in a household where we had sports. My background is I came from a Middle Eastern family. Women's sports, struggle here in America. So in the Middle East, it's just even more of a struggle. But being born and raised here in Dallas, Texas, I was exposed to a little bit more sports than I would if I was, raised back in the Middle East.
Mhm.
And so, fast forward, an unfortunate, a traumatic turn happened for my mom. I was 15 years old, and for her, at the age of 32, she was diagnosed of stage 4 colon cancer, and it was a shock to our family. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and she was very young when she had me. Of course, she got married at a really young age, which was very normal in the Middle Eastern culture population. And she was vomiting, and she had a lot of weight loss going on, but she went to a lot of gastroenterologists, doctors, specialists, and was said to take fiber and to eat more fibrous foods. And unfortunately, her disease had metastasized to stage 4 cancer, which had spread to the liver by the time that they found it. And of course, we know with colon cancer, that's probably maybe the most second deadliest disease, which is now coming up also on number one, due to our diet here in America and the increase of processed foods that we're consuming. So this one really hits hard with me, and there's no mistake that God put me in this position to do what I do. I consider my mom a high performer. Moms and dads are probably the highest performers that I know, above athletes. Hold down a lot. Raising kids, it's the craziest sport out there. And so my mom was my hero, and I wanted to really be in a position where I'm able to provide service to people that are high performers. And I did not know in what shape and form. I just know when I was going through NP school that I, was listening to all these Dr. Mark Hyman podcasts, and I was just such a fan. And I would go and do these rotations. And of course, as you know, Rob, we're taught, the disease process and the symptoms, and what we treat them with, the pharmacology, all that kind of thing. And I'm very grateful that I got that background as well. But it wasn't until COVID that I really, the integrative medicine, preventative medicine, just stuck out to me the most.
Your story is so familiar in that it's personal. So that functional
Mhm.
medicine lens, that
Yeah.
funnel It's personal as a family member. Mark Hyman, Jeff Bland, people on Mount Rushmore of functional medicine can easily say that. And, COVID did change the world, and it really changed the world in our ability to do things virtually. And it seems that the population is looking for alternatives to mainstream medicine, and hence the concept and the tremendous exponential growth of functional medicine. And what excites me most about your take on functional medicine is that you emphasize gut health. So, how do the gut and the brain, this bidirectionality together, influence performance and recovery in your athletic groups? Because I see you've got a basketball. Yay.
I
You've got a
do.
soccer ball.
I'm a huge
Okay.
basketball fan, so I want to put that out there. A lot of crazy things happening in the NBA, but we won't talk about that right now. But the reason why I feel the gut brain access is so much needed, I felt like there was a gap. I came across during COVID, this is something I haven't shared, is that I came across my mentor, Dr. Ara Supaya, who actually he is very well known in the functional sports medicine field and coined that term functional sports medicine. So I really want to put that out there, and I really want to thank him for everything that he has taught me. And with the gut, we're doing blood work. We're doing all this stuff in sport, but I was just scratching my head. I was like, why isn't anyone really looking at the gut? Why aren't we doing any stool analysis? Why aren't we looking at an organ that harvests so much energy, which I'll go into later, and where, like you said, 80% of our immune system lies in our gut. So if we're going to talk about injury, and if we're going to talk about recovery, and if we're going to talk about inflammation, I felt like this was a space that high endurance sports and also in the athletic population had lacked.
I agree. I'm going to hit you with a stat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you exercise for more than 2 hours, and most athletes exercise for more than two
Yeah.
hours cumulatively, you have an increased incidence of damage to the tight junctions and an elevation of a protein enzyme called zonulin. How do you
Right.
explain that to somebody like LeBron James? Say, look, dude, you are a specimen at 40 because he's playing with that Maverick. Oh, I'm so sorry. I said that, Luca. No, I'm not a Laker fan. I'm a Knick fan. Getting back to
You
it,
got to be
sorry.
neutral though.
And not be neutral to watch
I've
those.
got to be neutral though.
I
Yeah.
hear you. I got you. So how do you express to that elite athlete, an all-time
Yeah.
great, that,
Yeah.
by the way, your exercise regimen compromises your gut, and how do you get them to comply with it? And what would you do with it? I know there's a lot to unbox in that question.
Yeah. No, like you said, what you said in the beginning, the statistic about how we have decreased blood flow. So the way that I express it is that when you're exercising, what are we exercising the most? It's our muscles. So the body likes to send blood flow to the source of what is needed the most. So instead, it diverts the blood flow from the gut to the muscles in
Right.
order for it to start its job, and because our muscles are inflamed. But what happens when we don't have enough blood flow in our gut, that starts to be compromised. And for people that don't know what zonulin is, that is part of the tight junction that is in the gut, as well as occludin. Those are two things that I actually test for and look at and assess to see the junctions in the gut. And then I also tell them, well, why is that important? And I said, hey, I don't want to be gross here, but but I got to make it kind of first grade. Think about all the things that are stool that's supposed to pass, and we're supposed to poop it out,
Mhm.
but it's now going into your bloodstream. Do you want to have blood
Right.
mixed with you know particles of poop in your blood? And they're like, no. And so and also really showing them the data. So I think there a lot of the clients that I've worked with, they are incredibly smart and they do their research, or else they would not come to me, right? So one of the things that they love is data. I mean, they have the Whoop, they have the Aura Ring, they
Right,
have all these things from their strength and conditioning coaches, vertical jump data, all that kind of thing.
right.
So when it comes to their health and you're actually showing them that data, that also puts them in a position to make lifestyle interventions and really stick with that.
Great point. I mean, I said it, I didn't want to interrupt you. Great point that one of the reasons that the gut is damaged over duration of time of exercise is the blood flow is sent to other areas other than the gut. So that's
Right.
one of the reasons why inflammatory markers are elevated. The body's one big system, et cetera, et cetera. You know,
Mhm.
again, I'm a zonulin, occludin, candida, LPS tester. So you kind of opened a beautiful door. So let's do a little rapid fire. New
Sure.
York
Let's do
style.
it.
We're not going to go Southern style. We're going to go New York style. Let's do a little rapid fire. Yay or
Well, I'm
nay?
Texan. I can do Southern.
All right. Well, no, we're going to do New York. We're going to do rapid fire. Bagel and lox. Here we go.
Sure.
You mentioned
Bagel.
gluten free, of course. Zonulin including yay or nay and why?
Zonulin.
Okay.
I'm going to say zonula because I think one of the things, and I know you have some practitioners here, and they're like, well, what's the difference? So zonula is the antibody that we need to look at that's released. And so I think it's important when we do look at these markers that we don't confuse zonulin and zonula as a marker, because zonulin is something that's pathophysiology, that's part of what's in the gut, but zonula is the antibody that you're actually measuring and what you're testing for.
Great takeaway. You should only
Mhm.
use a test, a leaky gut zonulin test that's testing the antibody, not zonulin,
Exactly.
because zonulin changes and elevates and drops during the
Yep.
day because the gateways are supposed to open. You are
Yep.
without question an elite practitioner. I wasn't setting you up for the fall, but you definitely captivated that answer. I
Just wanted
love
to
it.
put that out there for anybody that might be testing. So I just think it's important, and it's one of those things that my mentor had mentioned with me as well.
It's a great point for everybody. Number two, what do you think
Mhm.
about testing for LPS, lipopolysaccharide?
Oh, this is a controversial one. So the reason why it's controversial is because there is research that says that, LPS with athletes, this is a very common thing, right? I've read so many things about LPS, and there's not much research within humans as much as there are with animals when it comes to LPS. But a lot of the research that is attached to LPS is neuroinflammation. And for people that are on this podcast, and again, that don't know what LPS is, LPS stands for lipopolysaccharides. That's a gram-negative bacteria. And whenever you do have quote unquote leaky gut, if that goes in the bloodstream, that is the one gram-negative bacteria that does cross the blood-brain barrier. And when it does cross the blood-brain barrier, that can cause neuroinflammation. So that is one of the markers that I do test for. And it's so incredibly important. People that also have mold tend to test for high levels of LPS as well. So definitely LPS proponent.
LPS actually been implicated in Alzheimer's as one of the leading
Mhm.
causes, and you want to talk about the gut to brain axis, neurodegenerative disease, which is
Right.
something we didn't really want to delve into because we wanted to stick more gut performance, brain performance. That's number one. Number two, expression of LPS increases the incidence of cardiovascular disease. You opened up a beautiful door about mold and microtoxins.
Mhm.
I do test for mold and microtoxins like you do. Mold is in the layers of the gut. The microtoxins are more for the fat. So they're more stored in fatty organs, etc.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yes or no? I hope I didn't steal your thunder. Mold microtoxin testing for gut in athletic performance.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think that's really important to highlight here when it does come to LPS is I also look at food sensitivities. One of the things that I see that's really related to mold toxicity is when I see an athlete that has, red, yellow, all these food sensitivities, please don't tell them to not eat 50 foods. Don't do that.
Not happening.
That would be a nightmare. Okay. I would really be highly suspicious for mold toxicity, because that's something that can really happen. It turns on the same, antibodies, inflammatory genes. And so testing for mold should be something that would warrant, if there are a lot of food sensitivities.
So you're going to test for like a leaky gut barrier panel of all these
Mhm.
different enzymes like zonulin, occludin, LPS, candida, and the such, but you're also going to test for mold and mycotoxins because if you come back with too many food sensitivities, there's no way that you can be sensitive to 35 or 50 foods without having a
Oh,
contributory factor. And that's where the mold and mycotoxins come in. And I'm going to say that most people are positive for mold and mycotoxins because their
yeah.
houses are sheetrock and not brick and mortar.
Yeah, unfortunately, right? And then also the other thing is that it's becoming more prevalent because we're not detoxifying as well. Why are we not detoxifying as well? Well, because we're not incorporating cruciferous foods that allows us to detoxify. We are just exposed to more toxins more than ever. We're not, going into saunas like our ancestors used to. We're not, and especially, I mean, with exercise, as you do sweat, that also helps as well. So for my clients that are quote unquote, non-athletes, that's something that I do also tell them and remind them that, hey, when you are exercising, you're actually sweating and you are detoxifying.
Indeed. How about calprotectin and lactoferrin?
Mhm. So those are markers that can be elevated when you're under high stress. But with calprotectin, what I look at is to rule out irritable bowel disease. So, people confuse irritable bowel syndrome and irritable bowel disease. The irritable bowel disease, you have ulcerative colitis and you have Crohn's disease. So whenever that level is elevated, I do stay in my lane and I do refer them to a gastroenterologist in order to, to warrant a colonoscopy or to look at it into further. But usually calprotectin should not be elevated in quote unquote a normal person.
Without question. We do tests for that, GI maps. The other
Right.
test, because everybody's going to ask, I'll make sure it's in the notes, KBMO Diagnostics, chief
Mhm.
clinical consultant for that, full transparency. But I want to
Well, full
ask you,
transparency, Genova Diagnostics for me. So
it's good that we're honest because people appreciate that and they want to know where to get
yeah,
the good quality tests from without question.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to point out is, listen, right now we have tests at our fingertips. You can literally go online and you can order whatever test that you want, right? But you don't know how many people have either DM me or email me and saying, Maggie, I got this, and this is what the algorithm gave me because I did a stool sample with so and so and so. I'm not going to mention any names, but they don't know what to do with it and they don't have any guidance. And so if you, one of the things that I just say is just really be really careful about that because you don't want to mess with the gut. It's very sensitive, and you want to work with a practitioner that knows exactly what they're doing. They're creating your protocol, they're retesting you, because we're not algorithms, and we've got history that we've got to look at, we've got physicals that we got to look at. We got to take that into consideration.
Yeah, that individuality that we're all seeking. I know that resonates with you because that's how you practice. This has
Well,
been
yeah, and it started with my mom too. And it's about being seen and it's about being heard, that you're just not another patient. And believe it or not, I've had a professor in school when I was going through my rotations, and she said, Maggie, the number one thing that you want to do as a licensed practitioner is you want to listen, because sometimes we create these differential diagnoses in our head. But if we truly listen, the patient's actually about to tell you what's wrong with them 80% of the time without you even testing. And I thought that was really powerful. And I really do take that with me with my clients, is that, hey, 80% of their history and physical tells me exactly what markers I need to look at.
You know, I had a similar moment in chiropractic school, which is not lauded sometimes for its diagnostic evaluation. And I had it was a medical doctor that came over to me and he said something very similar to you. He said 90% of the history is what the patient does. So look, listen, feel, if you will. That said, without question, we're going to look, listen, and feel for what I like to refer to as the super highway to health, the gut to brain axis.
There
Give me your
is.
take on that gut to brain axis in functional medicine.
Yeah. Let's go to Vegas, right?
Oh,
So,
goodness. What happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas, but that's the vagus
yeah.
nerve.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is looking at activity, and why is that important? Is because the vagus nerve is the interconnection between the gut and the brain. It's sensing, it neurotransmitters. Your serotonin is also made in your gut. About 80% of your serotonin is made in your gut. And so right now, even psychiatrists are now incorporating the GI map, or they'll incorporate all these gut testing with people that do have anxiety, depression, and a lot of psychiatric disorders right now. With my athletes, it's really interesting because they are overly burnt out and they're overly fatigued. So sometimes they could be misdiagnosed with REDS, relative energy deficiency syndrome, in which they're not taking enough calories, when really it's that they are lacking core vagal tone. They're on planes all the time. They're not grounding. They're not connected to the earth. Their sympathetic system is out of whack. They're expected to train so many hours during the week. And it really just flips them into a hyper sympathetic state.
Great point, because the vagus nerve, if the tone is right, or vagus nerve is in charge of the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
That seesaw with the sympathetic, and most of our patients are sympathetic oriented. So a low vagal tone really damages the gut, in that IBS and IBD has seen to increase because of inflammation. It's also decreased secretion of hydrochloric acid, pancreatic enzymes, parietal cells, and maybe the big secret sauce to a lot of leaky gut issues, decrease in bile. I will purport to you that the vagus nerve is the
Right.
biggest anti-inflammatory nerve, because it's
It really is.
afferent and efferent fibers are both anti-inflammatory, and it also has a connection with the spleen that's anti-inflammatory. That said, when somebody comes to you, what are you going to do to help them with a vagus nerve issue or a low tone in the vagus nerve?
Well, I think there's got to be, number one, some trust there, right? Because the number one thing is obviously stress. I already know that they're physically stressed, but the other part is the emotional part, and that takes time, right? So one of the things that's really easy to do is, let's incorporate meditation and let's incorporate breath work. And I'm by no means a breath work expert or anything like that. I do, refer them to people that are in my circle that are experts in those things. And if they're not interested, then, we've got apps out there like Insight Timer. There's Calm, where they're able to incorporate with meditation. Also, another thing is to stimulate the vagal tone is I'll have them take a toothbrush, and then we do have this nerve that's right along the side of our face where the trigeminal nerve is, and then also behind our ear. So I'll have them, take a toothbrush, their electric toothbrush, and then I'll just have them, like, of course, in the back, just kind of go up and down, also up and down in their cheek. Look at their melatonin and their cortisol levels. So I'll look at, and I'll do a cortisol awakening response, because melatonin and cortisol is also directly influenced, or the vagus nerve is directly influenced by melatonin and cortisol. So making sure that they're getting their circadian biology right. And you don't need to, any trainer can do this, right? Like you don't need to,
Right.
have these testing done. So this is just low hanging fruit where you can tell your athlete and be like, hey, I want you to expose your eyes to the sun early in the morning to the red light so we can, get our cortisol levels right, our melatonin levels, which are both anti-inflammatory and is very much needed. And then also looking at the sun whenever the sun is down as well with no contacts and glasses. So a lot of those other things. And of course, with nutrition, we want to incorporate foods that are, anti-inflammatory, and particularly the Mediterranean diet seems to be the most researched when it comes to the nervous system and the gut-brain axis.
Some great salient points on the vagus nerve. I really like what you talked about with the trigeminal nerve because they share a common nucleus in the brain. Um, we could go on and on
I
vagus nerve.
know.
5 years
I
ago,
know.
no one even talked about cranial nerve number 10. But
Mhm.
I don't want to miss, I'm writing it down. Could you help me with this? What are some of the overlooked causes of chronic fatigue, poor recovery in athletes and high performers? Because I think I missed that, and I think that is a critical question with some needed answers.
So there are a few. Obviously, we talked about gut permeability, right? So 80% of your where you harvest energy is in your gut. And that's through this mechanism of short chain fatty acids. So whenever you do eat fiber, your your gut breaks that down, and that's how we create the energy. Also talked about the poor vagal tone. The third thing that I have not talked about is mitochondrial dysfunction. So we're going to be mitochondrial health is going to blow up. It's already blowing up. I would say here the next 2 to 5 years. It's going to be really the next frontier when it comes to looking at gut health. So I'm all about the two M's, the microbiome, the mitochondria, and love talking about both of them. But so with athletes, the reason why mitochondria is so important is because that's where we generate ATP. And so if they're not recovering well, that's something to really assess is their metabolic health and their mitochondrial health.
Without question, I love a mitochondria or function or dysfunction now is at the top of everybody's consciousness. Most people don't realize that mitochondria came from bacteria. It has a
Right.
direct line to the gut. And the idea of mitochondrial leakage, just to seed for a conversation in a part two, is really where it is. That leakage doesn't allow that energy to produce of ATP. There's multiple complexes. Each complex has to go for us to get to the fifth complex, kind of give it a Reader's Digest version of that. I
The
love
Krebs
what we're talking
cycle.
about. Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
goodness. If we start talking about the Krebs cycle, if it's that
No,
part,
I don't want to do that.
neither do I. 38 ATPs, everybody. That's all you need to know. You'll get an A
That's
in
all. And
biology.
it decreases, unfortunately, after the age of 30. So,
Oh,
our ATPs, it starts to plummet a little bit after that.
goodness gracious.
Mhm.
What about some strategies or tools recommending for mitigating exercise-induced immunosuppression? Most people don't realize that exercising a lot can compromise somebody's immune system. I mean, we have this idea that athletes, male and female, are Superman and Superwomen, and they
Mhm.
are, but they still have immune systems. So
Mhm.
can you take the baton from that?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit, really more about food. So mitigating the exercise-induced immunosuppression is number one thing is polyphenols. Those are the most researched things. We talk about there's so much research around, blueberries and pomegranates and how that reduces oxidative stress. So making sure that we do have those polyphenols incorporated in our diet is extremely important. And then this is kind of a little gateway to the supplement that I actually just recently created, which is supplementing with colostrum. So one of the things that I really noticed with my athletes is they did have an elevated secretory IgA.
Mm,
For the people that are here on this podcast, a secretory IgA is a marker for it's a reflection of your immune system in your gut. And so one of the things that I was initiating was bovine colostrum.
Mm.
And then, so with the supplement that I created, which is Mood Juice, it's a combination of both colostrum and creatine. So it really does target that gut brain axis as well as the gut brain and mitochondria in generating ATP and to help with cognitive health and immune system. So the colostrum is actually great and it also reduces LPS endotoxins,
Wow.
the amount of endotoxins that are in your body as well. And when it comes to cold exposure and sauna, this is all determined really by their labs. And I know that sounds crazy, right? Because we see so many, Instagram reels and TikToks and all this stuff about, we should do cold or you should do this much sauna and all that kind of thing. But if I were to pick one, it would be sauna. And the reason being is because it is a form of a way to detoxify. With cold, you really have to have strong mitochondrial health in order to be able to take on the sauna. And some people here listening to this podcast are like, well, that's supposed to strengthen your mitochondrial health and all that kind of thing. I do hear you, but someone that really struggles with recovery, they are, going through relative energy deficiency syndrome. You do not want to tell them to bask their whole body in cold water. You might want to tell them, hey, take a bowl and put your face in the bowl. The body is it needs to be treated like a flower. It should be very gentle because it's in high sympathetic tone and it can't take on too much. So I would say those are the three things that really move the needle with a lot of my clients.
I love the fact that you have the combination. We were just talking about that before we came on. I
Mhm.
just saw you give a live and I said, we got to talk about your product. So you
Yeah.
cover colostrum. Now, creatine. I wrote my
Mhm.
thesis 26 years ago on creatine. It's grown
Oh,
past the idea of muscle.
I
Now, I
love
know you
that.
want to talk about that because not only is it the hottest supplement now, amazing, it took 26 to 30 years to get hot, but it may
Right.
be the hottest supplement for women's health and performance.
It is. I feel like I need to be quiet. I need to let you, take the mic on this one if that was your thesis. But yeah, there's now we're talking about with Alzheimer's and we're talking about neurological diseases, Parkinson's. There's been so much study around creatine because it helps with ATP production, right? And that just, it really ties down to the mitochondria. So a supplement that has once been utilized with bodybuilders and, building more muscle, we're starting to see so much more research around how it also supports the brain and gut health as well with its tight junctions.
Love the creatine, especially like you said, for neurodegenerative
Yeah.
disease. I
Mhm.
found the data indicates that you don't have to supersize it, megadose it, 5 milligrams, enough per
Yeah.
day. You concur
I was
with
going
that,
to
right?
say, well, I'm also connected well with two creatine specialists as well. And I'm just curious, with you, Rob, is that what have you seen as far as neurological health, the dosages in creatine? What have you seen to be effective?
I've been going 3 to 5,
Hmm.
3 to 5 milligrams. Now, there are some data that indicates 10 to 20. The more the merrier, we're finding out,
Right.
which kind of brings up an interesting point. We in the functional medicine world love to underdose. The medical world will dose appropriately.
Hmm.
I don't supersize the creatine. I like to do it over the duration of time. The creatine formulas that I use, of course, that will change now that you have a formula,
Yeah.
usually come with taurine, glutamine, glycine, and they have hydrolyzed fava bean because that hydrolyzed
Right.
fava bean is better than whey protein, and that's for another story. I don't use a lot of dairy as well.
Yeah.
So an interesting idea and and we would love to get a so-called proverbial creatine expert on because 45 minutes on creatine may be warranted at this juncture. That
Absolutely.
said, you work with these elite athletes. You really do. It's not one or two. That's your gig, if you will. Within that, how do you get these elite athletes? How do you get the LeBron Jameses, the Roger Federer? Yes, I know he's retired. The Tom Brady. Yes, I know he's retired. These type of elite athletes to comply with your wishes. I mean, hey, I'm number one. Why do I want to listen to anybody but myself?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to give you the most honest answer. And a lot of times they don't. And I think what's really important, even whether you're not an elite athlete or whether you're not, right? If you're like me and you're just a regular person, one of the things that I've had to learn is because, if you're a doctor, if you're a clinician, you have this innate thing that's within you that you want to fix. You see a lab and you want to fix it, right? You see somebody injured and you want to fix it. And what I learned is that we've got to meet people where they're at. And if there are times where, you know what, if they have 40%, well, then I want you to give me 40%, not 35%, right? And some of these guys, they'll come to me and they're like, well, I want to do this 60%. And I'll say, okay, I need 60%, right? And then there's some people that are all in on all in because I'm literally the last word on the block. They've had the best surgeons, they have had the best nutritionists, they have had the best team all around, but they seem to be hitting a brick wall and they don't know why when it comes to inflammation. And so it's kind of a moment of surrender. So I have all of these levels, as you would say, to surrender or what they're wanting to do. And it's just really also over time gaining trust. And that's not going to happen when they first meet you. These guys are most of the time have been, I would say, in control of their lives, getting up at a certain time, going to practices at a certain time, training at a certain time. Um, Most of the time they're in charge. And so for me to come in and be like, okay, do this, 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 I understand that it's a very uncomfortable situation sometimes, but I'm saying, hey, like if again, I'm at a point where if you're not ready for this, well, then let's revisit this another time. And I'm okay with saying that.
Great.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Patient management is people management. You're not just managing people, you're managing elite athletes, CEOs, makes it a little more difficult. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it's the control. It's the surrender of control. And hey, I'm guilty of it too.
mm,
I I want control. And even though I'm doing all this health stuff, I cringe when I go to the doctor. I cringe when I get my blood work. I cringe when I'm giving a stool sample and just anxiously awaiting for my test to come back. I probably make the worst patient, but I do have compassion for myself. And I do tell myself, hey, this is something that I get to do in order for me to be the best version of myself. So I just remind them, hey, do you want to be the best version of yourself? Do you want to be, again, nothing against Toyota, um, but do you want to be a Toyota or do you want to be a Ferrari? Pick what you want to be. Because the way that you manage both are they have two different engines and they're managed differently.
without question. So, as we get towards the finish line, I always like to end before we say our goodbyes, if you will. My buddy's always listening to my podcast in Switzerland, and he says, Rob, you make sure after 45 minutes that
Mm.
your guest gives me three things to implement. So he needs three things to
The
implement:
three magical things. Oh.
the gut to brain connection. The floor is yours, Maggie.
Well, let's start with the low hanging fruit. Okay. You do not have to test for this for the gut brain connection. I would say sleep. You need
Great.
your sleep. This is where recovery happens. This is where we physiological processes that we're not fully aware of happen when you're asleep. That could be another podcast in itself. So I would say sleep. The second thing would be, I don't want to say eat these foods, but eat foods that actually grow from the ground or something that you can kill. If it's not those two things, you need to let go of it or have them once in a while. Okay. So those things. So if you can't catch it, if you can't kill it, if you can't pick it, don't eat it.
Avoid ultra processed foods.
Right.
Got it.
The third thing I would say is, and this is something we didn't touch on, is community. Love is maybe one of the best medicines out there, and we don't really talk about it. And there are a lot of people out there that are performing, that are high performers, that are extremely isolated, very successful. But if you don't have somebody where you can call at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, then that's going to affect your health big time. So I would say those three things. It doesn't need a pill. It's something that's accessible, and it truly moves the needle within your health overall.
Those are three great things. So how can people get in touch with you and reach out for your product, etc.?
So I am on, my website is maggieawad.com. You can reach me there. I also have an Instagram. I'm not, I have a LinkedIn. I'm not sure, you're probably going to link all those things on your show notes.
Absolutely.
And then also the new product that I have going on, the colostrum and creatine duo on the market. Super excited. It is usemoodjuice.com.
Outstanding. I'll be getting some of that real soon.
Be happy to get you some.
Pronto, pronto. It's been my pleasure. You've been great. A lot of real key takeaways. I learned a lot. You're a lot of fun. And without question, you were extremely conversational. You warned me. You said, get ready, Mr. New York.
Told you we're going to dive deep a little bit.
It's okay. I like it. I got a little dirt on my hands. I need to do that once in a while. Everybody, my name is Dr. Rob Silverman, Maggie Awad, Proven Health Alternatives, always yours in health.